The scent of turpentine and linseed oil clung to Rosemary Ashcroft's fingers as she cleaned the final paintbrush in the cramped studio above the apothecary. The bristles had gone stiff from neglect, much like everything else in her life since the scandal. She worked the solvent through each strand with methodical precision, watching the crimson pigment bleed into cloudy water, the same shade she had once used to paint her father's portrait, back when the Ashcroft name still opened doors instead of slamming them shut. That portrait now hung in some creditor's parlor, sold along with everything else when her father's investments had collapsed. The whispers had started immediately: improper speculation, debts to unsavory characters, a gentleman's daughter left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a talent for watercolors that no respectable family would acknowledge. 3 years had passed since the fall. 3 years of taking commissions for shopkeepers' signs and teaching drawing to merchants' daughters who would never be received in proper society. 3 years of pretending the weight of her former life did not press against her chest every time she passed the townhouses in Mayfair where she had once danced. The knock at her door came just as the church bells struck 7. Rosemary set down the brush, wiping her hands on her already stained apron. Her landlady knew better than to disturb her in the evenings, and she expected no visitors. She never expected visitors anymore. The man standing in the narrow hallway should not have fit in such a cramped space, yet somehow he made the peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards seem deliberate, as if poverty were merely an aesthetic choice. He wore black from collar to boot, severe and perfectly tailored, with a greatcoat that whispered of foreign tailors and old money. His hair fell dark against his collar, longer than fashion dictated, and his eyes, pale as winter ice, fixed on her with an intensity that made her fingers tighten on the doorframe. "Miss Ashcroft," he said, and his voice carried the faint trace of an accent she could not place. "I require a portrait painter. Your name was recommended to me." She should have asked by whom. She should have inquired about his identity, his purpose, the nature of the commission. Instead, she found herself stepping back, allowing him entry into her pitiful studio with its single window and scattered canvases. "I do not paint portraits any longer," she said, though the lie tasted bitter. She painted whatever kept bread on her table and coal in her grate. "I specialize in commercial work now." A pity. He moved through her space like water, examining the half-finished sign for a tobacconist, the botanical studies she had done for an herbalist's manual. His fingers, long and pale, hovered over a small canvas tucked in the corner, a landscape she had painted for herself. The ruins of her family's country house, rendered in shades of memory and loss. "You have considerable talent for capturing what has been lost." The observation struck too close to truth. "What is it you want, Mr. Theron Castellane?" He turned to face her fully, and the lamplight caught the sharp planes of his face, the aristocratic severity of his features. "I want you to paint what you see when you look at me. Nothing more, nothing less. I will pay whatever price you name." "I cannot accept charity, sir." "I offer none." A shadow passed across his expression, too quick to name. "I have been searching for an artist with your particular vision. One who has known loss intimately enough to recognize its presence in others. The society painters see only what they wish to see. You, I suspect, see what is actually there." Rosemary's pride warred with necessity. The rent was due in 4 days, and her last commission had barely covered food. £50, she said, naming a sum that would have been reasonable once, that was now almost insulting in its presumption. 200, he countered. 100 now, the remainder upon completion. I require 12 sittings, each of 2 hours. You will work here, in your studio, at whatever hours suit your schedule. The amount staggered her. With £200, she could pay her debts, purchase proper materials, perhaps even secure a better situation. Why so generous? "Because I suspect this portrait will cost you more than time and paint, Miss Ashcroft, and I believe in fair compensation for true sacrifice." He produced a leather purse from his coat and counted out coins onto her work table, gold sovereigns that gleamed like small suns in the dim light. Rosemary stared at the money, at this strange man who spoke in riddles and paid fortunes for portraits from a ruined gentlewoman. "Tomorrow evening," she heard herself say. 8 o'clock. The light will be poor, but I work better by lamplight now. As do I. He moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Ashcroft, when you paint me, I ask only that you not look away. Whatever you see, however it troubles you, do not look away." Then he was gone, leaving only the scent of night air and something else. Something old and faintly metallic that reminded her of the taste of fear. Rosemary locked the door behind him and returned to the coins on her table. She picked one up, testing its weight, half expecting it to vanish like fairy gold in the stories her nurse had told. But it remained solid and real, warm from his pocket, bearing the profile of the young queen. She pressed it to her lips and allowed herself one moment of weakness, one moment to remember what it felt like to have choices. Then she began preparing her materials for the portrait that would change everything. Theron Castellane arrived precisely at 8 the following evening, and for the next 12 nights thereafter. He sat in the single chair she positioned near the lamp, his posture unnaturally still, his pale eyes fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. Rosemary worked in silence, building up layers of paint, trying to capture the contradiction of him, the youth of his face set against something ancient in his gaze, the warmth of his coloring against the coldness that seemed to emanate from his very presence. On the third sitting, she noticed he cast no shadow on the wall behind him, though the lamp burned bright enough to throw her own silhouette in sharp relief. On the fifth sitting, she realized he never blinked. On the seventh sitting, she understood that he did not breathe. She said nothing. She had promised not to look away, and she kept that promise, though her hand trembled as she mixed the pigments for his skin. Too pale, too perfect, like marble given the semblance of life. She painted what she saw, a man who was not a man, a creature of such terrible beauty that looking at him too long made her chest ache with inexplicable sorrow. "You have questions," he said on the ninth evening, breaking the silence that had become their custom. "I have many questions." Rosemary set down her brush, meeting his gaze directly. "But I am not certain I want the answers." "Wise." He shifted slightly, the first unnecessary movement she had seen him make. "Most people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths." "I am not most people, Mr. Castellane. I have already lost everything that mattered. Truth, at least, cannot be taken from me." "Can it not?" He rose from the chair, moving to stand before her easel. She had captured him exactly, the elegant severity, the ageless quality, the profound isolation that clung to him like a second skin. "You paint me as I am, Miss Ashcroft. Do you understand what that means?" "It means you are not human." The words emerged steady, though her pulse kicked at the hollow of her throat. "It means you are something that should not exist, yet does. It means I have been sitting alone in a room with a predator for 9 evenings, and I am either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. Perhaps both." He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something like approval in his expression. "I am vampire, Miss Ashcroft. I have walked this earth for 3 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall, watched generations bloom and wither like flowers. And in all that time, I have never met an artist who could see past the glamour we cast, the illusion of humanity we wear like a comfortable coat. Until you." Rosemary should have fled. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to put distance between herself and this admission. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why did you come to me?" "Because you remind me of someone I lost." His voice carried the weight of centuries. "Not in appearance. She was dark where you are fair, tall where you are small, but in the way you hold yourself, the way you refuse to be diminished by loss, the way you see truth even when it would be easier to look away." Who was she? "My wife, my human wife, 300 years ago, before I was turned." He moved to the window, staring out at the London night. She was an artist as well. She painted me on our wedding day, and when I look at that portrait now, I see the man I was, young, mortal, full of dreams that death would one day claim. I wanted to see how I appear now, through the eyes of someone with her gift for truth. And what do you see? Rosemary gestured to the canvas. I see a monster wearing the face of a man. I see loneliness that has calcified into something harder than bone. I see the weight of 3 lifetimes stacked like cordwood without purpose. He turned back to her. I see what I have become, and it is not pleasant. I see something else as well. She stood, moving to stand beside him before the portrait. I see someone who still remembers what it meant to be human. Someone who seeks out truth even when it causes pain. Someone who is trying, in his own way, to hold on to something that was lost long ago. His hand rose, hovering near her face but not quite touching. You should fear me, Miss Ashcroft. I should fear many things, Mr. Castellane. Poverty, starvation, the cruelty of former friends who cross the street to avoid acknowledging me. A vampire who pays me £200 to paint his portrait seems rather low on the list of immediate threats. Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. You are either the bravest woman I have ever met, or the most reckless. Again, perhaps both. The silence that fell between them felt different now, charged with possibility, heavy with words unspoken. Rosemary returned to her easel, but her hand remained steady as she lifted her brush. She had named the thing in her studio, given it shape and definition, and found that the naming had not destroyed her. If anything, she felt more solid, more real than she had in 3 years. Tell me about her, she said quietly. Your wife. What was her name? Catherine. The word emerged like a prayer. She died in childbirth, along with our son. I was away, fighting in a war I no longer remember the purpose of. When I returned, they were already buried. I stood at their graves and begged God, the devil, anyone who would listen, to give me back what I had lost. Something answered that prayer, Miss Ashcroft, but not in the way I had hoped. You were turned. By a creature who found my grief amusing. She made me into what I am, and left me to discover the cost of immortality, to watch everyone I had ever loved age and die while I remained frozen in this moment, forever young, forever hungry, forever alone. Rosemary set down her brush. You are not alone now. Am I not? You are here because I pay you, Miss Ashcroft. When the portrait is complete, you will take your money and return to your life. I will return to mine. We will be strangers once more, ships passing in the night. Is that what you want? The question stood between them like furniture between them. Theron turned to face her fully, and she saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. Hope, perhaps, or the memory of hope long abandoned. What I want, he said slowly, is impossible. I am a monster, Miss Ashcroft. I survive by drinking blood. I cannot walk in sunlight. I will never age, never die, never know the simple human pleasures of a warm meal or a peaceful sleep. What kind of life could I offer anyone? What kind of life do I have now? She moved closer, drawn by something she had no words for. I am already dead to society, Mr. Castellane. My name is ruined. My prospects kneel. I work in a cramped studio above an apothecary and paint signs for shopkeepers. If I am very lucky, I will live another 40 years in exactly this manner, growing old and poor and forgotten. If I am unlucky, I will starve in the next winter. Either way, I am already lost. Then let me offer you something better. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. This is the deed to your family's country house. I purchased it from your father's creditors 2 years ago. I have been maintaining it, keeping it ready, waiting for the right moment to return it to an Ashcroft. Rosemary's hands shook as she took the paper, unfolding it to see her family name inscribed in legal script. Why? Why would you do this? Because Catherine painted our home before she died. She captured it in watercolors, the gardens, the orchard, the way the light fell through the windows in the morning. After she was gone, I could not bear to look at those paintings. They reminded me too much of what I had lost, but I kept them, carried them with me through 3 centuries, because they were all I had left of her vision, her way of seeing beauty in the world. He moved to her work table, where she kept her personal sketches. He lifted the landscape of her ruined home, the one he had noticed on his first visit. When I saw this, I knew. You have her gift, Miss Ashcroft. You see the world as she did. And I realized that perhaps God or fate or whatever force governs this universe was offering me a second chance. Not to replace what I lost, but to honor it by helping someone who carries the same light. This is too much. Rosemary clutched the deed, tears burning in her eyes. I cannot accept this. It is worth a fortune. It is worth nothing to me if it remains empty. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Miss Ashcroft. Let me spend some of it restoring what was taken from you. But why? She looked up at him, searching his face for answers. What do you gain from this? The knowledge that something good came from my existence. The hope that perhaps I am not entirely the monster I see in your portrait. He took her hand, his fingers cool against her skin. And perhaps, if you are willing, the chance to know you better. Not as patron and artist, but as friends. As two people who understand what it means to lose everything and still find the courage to continue. Rosemary thought of her empty life, her cramped studio, her endless loneliness. She thought of this strange, sad creature who had carried his dead wife's paintings for 300 years. She thought of the truth she had painted on her canvas. A monster, yes, but also a man who remembered what it meant to love. I am willing, she whispered, but I need you to understand something, Mr. Castellane. I am not Catherine. I will never be Catherine. If we are to be friends, it must be as ourselves, not as echoes of people long dead. I know. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that was cold as winter and gentle as snow. I see you, Rosemary Ashcroft. Not as a replacement, not as a memory, but as yourself. And that is precisely why I want to know you better. The portrait was completed on the 12th evening. Rosemary signed her name in the corner with a hand that no longer trembled, then stepped back to survey her work. She had painted truth, a vampire in all his terrible beauty, isolated and ancient and profoundly lonely. But she had also painted hope, captured in the slight softening around his eyes, the way his hands rested open rather than clenched, the subtle forward lean of his posture that suggested he was ready, finally, to step back into the world. It is perfect, Theron said quietly. Thank you. What will you do with it? Hang it in my home, I think, as a reminder of what I am and what I might yet become. He turned to her. And what will you do, Miss Ashcroft? Will you return to your family's house, restore it, paint it as it once was? I think, she said slowly, I will paint it as it is now. Ruined but still standing, changed but not destroyed. And then I will paint it as it could be, with care and time and hope. May I visit you there? Not as patron, but as friend? I would like that very much. He smiled then, a true smile that transformed his face from beautiful to breathtaking. Then I shall call on you in a fortnight, once you are settled. We can walk the grounds together, and you can tell me your plans for restoration. I am told I have excellent taste in gardens. I am sure you do after 300 years of practice. They stood together in the small studio, surrounded by the evidence of her talent and his wealth, two lost souls who had found something unexpected in each other's company. Rosemary knew that society would never accept their friendship, that questions would be asked about the mysterious gentleman who visited the ruined Ashcroft girl. But she found she did not care. She had been dead to society for 3 years. She might as well enjoy the freedom that came with social death. There is one more thing, Theron said as he prepared to leave. The portrait. I paid you £200 for it, but I believe the true cost was much higher. You sacrificed your peace of mind to paint what you saw. You chose truth over comfort. That kind of courage deserves recognition. He withdrew another purse from his coat, heavier than the first. This is not charity, Miss Ashcroft. This is payment for a debt I owe to an artist who reminded me what it means to see clearly. Use it to restore your home, to purchase materials, to rebuild your life. And know that you have given me something far more valuable in return. You have given me hope that I might yet deserve the gift of continued existence. Rosemary accepted the purse, too overwhelmed to count the contents. I do not know what to say. Say you will paint again. Not signs for shopkeepers, but art that matters. Art that tells the truth. The world needs artists like you, Miss Ashcroft. It needs people who refuse to look away. I will, she promised. I will paint truth, whatever the cost. He left then, disappearing into the London night with his completed portrait wrapped in cloth. Rosemary stood at her window, watching his figure fade into shadow, and felt something shift in her chest, the first stirring of hope she had experienced in 3 years. The restoration of Ashcroft Manor took 6 months. Rosemary threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised her, directing workmen, consulting with gardeners, choosing fabrics and furnishings that honored the house's history while acknowledging its new reality. She painted constantly, filling canvas after canvas with studies of the house in various stages of repair, broken windows being replaced, gardens being tamed, rooms being brought back to life. Theron visited every fortnight, as promised. They walked the grounds together, discussing art and history and the strange shape of their friendship. He told her stories of the centuries he had lived, the changes he had witnessed, the loneliness that had nearly destroyed him. She told him of her fall from grace, the cruelty of former friends, the slow death of hope that had preceded his arrival in her life. They did not speak of love. That word remained unspoken between them, too dangerous, too weighted with implication. But Rosemary felt it growing nonetheless, taking root in the spaces between their conversations, in the way he looked at her paintings, in the careful distance he maintained as if afraid his very presence might somehow taint her. On the evening of the house's completion, she invited him to dinner. She had hired a small staff, a cook, a maid, a groundskeeper, enough to maintain the property without overwhelming her limited funds. The dining room gleamed with polish, the table set with china that had been rescued from storage, candles casting warm light over everything. Theron arrived precisely at 8, dressed in formal evening wear that made him look like a prince from a fairy tale. He carried a wrapped package under one arm. "For you," he said, presenting it with a slight bow. "A housewarming gift." Rosemary unwrapped the package to find a painting, old, the canvas darkened with age, the frame ornate and heavy. It showed a young woman in medieval dress, dark-haired and laughing, seated in a garden with a paintbrush in her hand. The style was primitive but charming, full of life and joy. "Catherine," she breathed. Her self-portrait, painted the summer before she died. "I want you to have it." He moved to stand beside her, looking down at the image of his long-dead wife. Not as a burden, but as a blessing. She would have liked you, I think. She would have appreciated your courage, your refusal to be diminished by circumstance. And I believe she would have wanted you to have this, to know that you are not competing with a ghost. You are simply yourself, and that is enough. Rosemary set the painting carefully on the mantelpiece, positioning it where the light would catch it best. "Thank you. I will treasure it. As I treasure you." The words emerged quiet but firm. "Rosemary, I need to tell you something. I need to say it plainly, without the careful distance we have maintained these past months." She turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." He said it simply, without flourish, as if stating an obvious fact. "I did not intend to. I thought myself incapable of such feeling after so many years alone. But you have awakened something in me that I thought long dead. The desire to share my existence with another. To build something that matters. to be known and accepted despite my nature. Theron, let me finish. He raised a hand, not quite touching her. I know what I am asking is impossible. I am a vampire. I cannot give you children, cannot grow old with you, cannot offer you a normal life. If you accept me, you accept a future of secrecy and strangeness. You accept the knowledge that I must feed on blood to survive, that I will outlive you by centuries, that our love will always exist in shadow. Are you finished? Rosemary asked. He nodded, looking suddenly uncertain, suddenly young despite his 300 years. Good. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Because I need to tell you that I am falling in love with you as well. And I am not interested in a normal life, Theron. Normal life cast me aside 3 years ago. I am interested in truth, in beauty, in the strange and wonderful possibility of loving someone who sees me as I actually am. I am interested in you. But the cost, I know the cost. I have always known the cost. From the moment I painted your portrait and chose not to look away, I knew what I was accepting. I am not afraid of your nature, Theron. I am only afraid that you will leave, that you will decide I am not worth the risk of loving again. He cupped her face in his marble hands, his touch gentle as prayer. You are worth every risk. You are worth 300 years of empty rooms if they led me to this moment. You are worth everything. Then kiss me, she whispered. Stop talking about impossibilities and kiss me. He did. His lips were cool against hers, his embrace careful as if she were made of spun glass. But Rosemary pressed closer, wrapping her arms around his neck, kissing him with all the passion and courage that had carried her through 3 years of loss. She tasted winter and loneliness and hope, tasted 300 years of isolation giving way to connection. When they finally parted, both breathless, despite his lack of need for air, Theron rested his forehead against hers. I want to give you everything. I want to restore not just your house but your place in society. I want to use my wealth and influence to rebuild what was taken from you. No. Rosemary pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. I do not want my old life back, Theron. That life was built on foundations that crumbled at the first test. I want to build something new, something that is ours, not a restoration of what was lost, but a creation of what could be. I want to paint, to live in this house, to love you without apology or pretense. That is enough. That is more than enough. You are certain? I have never been more certain of anything. He smiled then, and she saw in his expression the man he must have been 300 years ago, young, hopeful, full of dreams. Then let us build something new together. Let us create a life that honors both what we have lost and what we have found. Let us be brave enough to love despite all the reasons we should not. Yes, she said simply. Let us do exactly that. They stood together in the restored dining room, surrounded by candlelight and possibility, two lost souls who had found their way home. Outside, the gardens bloomed in darkness, and the house that had been empty for 3 years filled with warmth and laughter, and the sound of two people discovering that love, true love, could survive anything, even death, even time, even the impossible distance between human and vampire. Rosemary knew that challenges lay ahead. She knew that their love would require secrecy, that questions would be asked, that she was choosing a path that diverged sharply from anything society would accept. But she had already been cast out of society once. She had already lost everything that mattered according to the world's measure. What she had found in return was something far more valuable: truth, courage, and a love that saw her exactly as she was and chose her anyway. She had found a partner who understood loss, who valued her art, who would walk beside her through whatever challenges came. And she had found, in the most unexpected way possible, that sometimes the greatest treasures emerge from the deepest ruins. Sometimes the most profound love grows in the spaces between what was and what could be. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is choose truth over comfort, love over safety, hope over despair. As Theron took her hand and led her to the table he had set with such care, as they sat down to share a meal that only she would eat while he kept her company, Rosemary understood that she had been given a rare gift, the chance to begin again, to build a life on her own terms, to love without reservation or regret. The portrait she had painted of him hung in his London home, a testament to truth and courage. The portrait Catherine had painted of herself hung in Rosemary's dining room, a blessing from the past. And between these two images, past and present, loss and hope, Rosemary and Theron built something entirely their own, a love that transcended time, that honored what had been lost while embracing what had been found, that proved even the longest loneliness could end if one was brave enough to see clearly and love truly. The candles burned low as the evening deepened, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the restored manor. Rosemary looked across the table at the vampire who had given her back her home, her art, her hope, and saw not a monster but a man, flawed, ancient, impossibly kind. She saw her future, strange and beautiful and entirely her own. And in his pale eyes, she saw herself reflected, not as she had been, ruined and diminished, but as she was now, whole, courageous, loved. She reached across the table and took his cool hand in her warm one, and in that simple gesture, sealed a promise that would last far longer than any mortal lifetime. They had both sacrificed much to reach this moment. They had both lost everything that society valued. But in finding each other, in choosing truth and courage over comfort and convention, they had gained something infinitely more precious. A love that could survive anything, even the impossible distance between human and vampire, between past and present, between what was lost and what had been found. The night deepened around them, and in the restored manor house, two souls who had wandered alone for far too long finally came home to each other.